Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, and today we have a conference camera to take a look at. So this is the Nuroum C10 conference camera, and this is made by a company called Nearity, so you might see either branding out there, and if you want to find more about these cameras, you'll find it under the Nearity brand. At any rate, this sample was sent to me by that company for this review, so I was provided this free of charge. However, I'm not being paid on top of the free product sample I'm receiving, and as always, my opinions remain objective and my own. Let's go ahead and start with unboxing the camera, and then we can talk about some of the specifications that this sports. So in this rather unassuming white box, we have some kind of warranty card in Chinese. We have a manual here that is in English and in Chinese, and it's got some color photos to tell you the specifications of the device, the buttons, optimal placement in a conference setting, and then just a few other essentially setup ideas. And then of course we have the camera itself. And you'll notice that once I take the camera out of the box, that is literally it. Let's demask it and take a look at what we have. There's a few things that immediately stand out on this device. First off is that it has essentially three main components integrated. It has a camera, 4 microphones on the top, and then a speaker column around the very bottom of the unit. A few other things to note is that on the bottom is our connectivity. So this is USB Type-C powered, and the cable simply just winds up, essentially plugs in at whatever length you need. And this is a nice feature. The only drawback is that the cable is integrated. Anything happens to the cable, then you're fresh out of luck. For those of you that are not rocking the USB Type-C world yet, they do include an adapter from USB Type-C to Type-A, and that is just secured with a friction fit on the bottom of the device. So let's talk about some of the actual specifications here. There are 4 microphones, as I mentioned earlier, on the top, and those are AI powered to potentially remove any background noise and to track people up to about 3 meters or 10 feet away. So if you do have a deep conference table, you can pick up the people theoretically at the back. The buttons on the top are for controlling the speaker volume, turning on and off the camera, and then of course muting it. And there are indicator lights that allow you to know when those things are being engaged. And to top it all off, we do have a 1080p web camera in here that is 90 degrees. So I'll be showing you some test footage right away of what the difference is on a conventional laptop versus what you can get on the C10. So let's take a look at that right now. For demonstration purposes, I will be using the ThinkPad X1 Nano, which has a 720p built-in web camera at the top of the display. So let's go ahead and take a look at the difference in quality. All right, so this is the X1 Nano 720p web camera that we're using as the basis. I have a lot of light coming from my studio lights here. So this does give it essentially its best chance in terms of its quality and its frame rate. Now, let's go ahead and compare how that looks against this guy. I will be putting it at the same distance away from me, and we'll see how much wider of a shot we can possibly get. Okay, so this is the camera and the microphone on the camera. I've actually got some background noise right now that hopefully its AI is cutting out. It is going to sound like a kind of a drone if it isn't. One thing that you'll notice, and I'm seeing it on my screen, is that the white balance is definitely challenged at short distances. You'll see later on in the video where I've actually tried this at a distance greater than 6 feet, and the white balance seems okay. But there is something obviously not quite right. The color of my shirt is about correct. The color of the wall is correct. But for whatever reason, I'm just kind of completely washed out due to the light. And if you see me put my hand up in front of the light, the exposure works out a lot better. And if I completely turn off my studio lights, then everything is okay. Now you might say, well, you're not going to have studio lights probably in your conference room. And that's a totally fair point. At distances, like I said, greater than 6 feet, the washout doesn't seem to happen. But if you're in a really well-lit room and someone is close to the camera, I think that is going to be a challenge. So just putting that out there, you can draw your own conclusions, of course. If I go ahead and turn off
all of my lights and come back, things are considerably better. There's still a little bit going on, but it's nowhere near as bad. So this thing must be very sensitive to light, and that is good in most circumstances, but it could be challenging in others. So take that as what you will.
So as you can see, we've got some buttons on the top that we can press, and it gives us an audio cue as well as a colored light to indicate that the feature is off. The only downside, of course, is that you can't necessarily tell unless you're looking at the screen which one you've engaged. And that's maximum volume, and yeah, it's pretty decently loud. I'll give you a quick demonstration of the audio playing out of this. Alright, so after messing around with this, I think we can draw a few conclusions rather readily. The first is that you definitely get a wider field of view with this than you would a standard laptop. Now, a lot of aftermarket web cameras are also going to sport that wide 90-degree view. So that is not what this thing is going to win prizes for. The other thing that I will definitely note is that if you are within close range, the white balance just doesn't seem to be able to cope correctly. I tried turning my studio lights on and off, changing the brightness, the color warmth, and I always looked washed out. I never felt that I could get that to really be perfect. However, if I positioned the camera at least 6 feet away from my face, I found that the white balance looked a lot better in comparison. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are planning on having this close to you on a desk, there might be a better alternative. It is best suited in an environment where there's going to be some distance between the person using the camera and the camera itself. A couple other things to note. You heard the audio quality in the samples, and it is pretty good. The audio strength from the speaker is also quite good. There's actually some decent bass. I also really like the idea that the cable is integrated and is able to power the entire thing without any additional cables needing to be plugged into the laptop. The inclusion of the USB Type-C to Type-A adapter on the bottom is a very nice touch. The only downside, of course, is that the cable is wired to the device itself, so if anything happens to that cable, you are replacing the entire unit, unless you are very comfortable with busting open electronics and, desoldering cables. I can understand that they probably did it to save on costs and parts and having to engineer space in the bottom for it, but it is one of those things that I do want to point out to you. The touch controls on the top work really, really well, and so long as you have the perfect space and place for a device like this in mind, I think you'll actually be relatively happy with it. At any rate, I would like to thank Nearity and Nuroum for sending me this C10 to test. I think it's a pretty decent little device. There are some drawbacks, I will readily admit, including the tilt and white balance issues, the integrated cable, but it's also at a respectable price point compared to a lot of other cameras that have less features. If you are interested, I will leave some links in the description down below for you to consider. And as always, if you enjoyed this sort of content, please consider doing the big four. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so the next time I feature a camera like this or other laptop device, you'll be the first to know about it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.